Welcome, everybody, to Bar Restaurant Breakthroughs Podcast. This is episode number 8, and today we have Jesiah Mauck on with us, who is an expert in people management. So one thing we're going to dive into here shortly is just, exactly what is people management, how does it help bar restaurant owners succeed, make their business run more smoothly, and we'll dive into that. But before we do that, Jesiah, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, and kind of explain to us exactly what people management really means to you. Why is that so important to bar and restaurant owners to be successful in this business?
Sure, absolutely. It's very, very important. We'll get into that in just a little bit. So, I have been in the restaurant industry for coming up on 20 years now, and I started out as a busboy, bartended my way through college, and then decided to build a career in the hospitality industry. A big chunk of my career was actually spent with Darden Restaurants, helping to build the Seasons 52 brand. And I'll tell you, those years were very formative for me, for my leadership and management style. Over the course of my career, working for a couple different companies, I worked my way up to multi-unit manager, and now I leverage my experience to help independent restaurant owners achieve sustainable success. I started a restaurant consulting group called Gray Bar Solutions, and the goal is really to provide strategic management and operations solutions to small restaurants. One of the big things that I focus on, like you said, is people management. That's a big part of the strategic management part, so that's one of the areas that I focus on. From my background, Bill Darden, he's kind of famous for saying that people are his biggest competitive advantage. I would add to that they're not just your biggest competitive advantage; they're your biggest asset in general. They're more important than your real estate. They're more important than your buildings, your equipment. More important than anything really. Simon Sinek, who was a huge influence on me, talks a lot about how CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, talk a lot about how important their employees are, but they don't actually act on it.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I help operators really act like they care about their people and that their people are important.
People want to feel appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll work better for you
in this day and age and in this generation, for sure. And ironically, those types of organizations are the ones that are the most successful.
Right.
Focusing on shareholder value is fantastic in the short term, but what's really good for the long term is taking care of your people and focusing on them. So, that's one of the things that I do is teach operators how to create a people-focused culture within their organization. I want people to realize how challenging people management is.
Right.
But how important it is. I want people to get excited about it because it's incredibly powerful. It's an incredibly powerful tool when you learn how to deploy it effectively.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Let's just say I'm calling you for help right now. I run a restaurant. I run a bar. I don't have things under control. My staff isn't listening. And it's just there's a lot of chaos going on in the business. How would you start working with a bar owner, a restaurant owner, to really help them succeed to where their employees are really giving the best experience to their customers, and they're motivated and driven, to want to work there for the owner? Because obviously, the more excited they are about everything, the better the work, the better the work environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that I'm really passionate about. So to answer your question, I think really what it comes down to, at the very beginning, at least, is building a culture.
Yeah.
These types of organizations don't just happen, by chance. It takes a lot of work to build them. A lot of people have different names for these types of organizations where their employees are successful. Simon Sinek calls them people-focused organizations. Some people call them developmentally dedicated organizations, DDOs. I was listening to an interview with Grant Cardone and Adam Michaels, where he was referring to them as lighthouse employers. And I thought that was a really cool metaphor for what we're trying to do when we're building this type of culture. So I actually ended up writing an article about it and reaching out to him, talking to him about it. So what is a lighthouse employer? What does it take to build that culture where people are flocking to you instead of you going out there and chasing top talent, trying to recruit top talent, retain top talent? What does it take to make that happen? And I think I kind of narrowed it down to 7 different aspects of what it takes to build the type of culture that you're looking for that's going to prevent those types of problems that you were just talking about. So I think that is the most important aspect, is make sure that you have the correct culture, because that's really the foundation of the problem that you just talked about.
And
So
how
really,
do you create that culture?
well, that's what I want to talk about. There, I thought about it for an extended period of time. How do you become one of those organizations? How do you create that culture? Like I said, I think I narrowed it down to 7 things. First and most important thing is genuinely caring about people, especially your employees. It's really got to be genuine. People can see right through, a fake show of concern for their well-being or whatever.
Right.
So what does that look like in real life? Well, you want to exude positive body language. You want to be approachable, engage and interact with your employees on a regular basis, and not just about what they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
So genuinely care about your employees. Number 2, demonstrate a personal obsession with making them happy and fulfilled. And that was something that I struggled with for an extended period of time, trying to figure out, is it really the employer's responsibility to make sure that their employees are happy? I mean, happiness is kind of an intangible thing and very subjective.
Right.
But at the end of the day, people, especially in this generation, really want to work for an organization where they can leave work every day happy and with a sense of fulfillment. So,
Yeah.
in fact, Simon Sinek thinks that it's a basic human right. I don't know if I'd necessarily go that far, but it's definitely important if you want to create that type of culture,
Right.
where your employees really want to work there. Number 3, publicly commit to making them successful. Because really, at the end of the day, the best employers are those that make their employees successful simply because they work there. Think about Chef Thomas Keller out in French Laundry. How many successful chefs has he churned out? Think about the power of that. And people want to work there just because of what they can do after they work there,
Right.
and the experience they get, the resources they have after the fact. So another big one for me, number 4, mentor without expectation. That's really huge. That's the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about. When we're talking about building a culture or building a developmentally dedicated organization, one of the fundamentals is teaching something new every day to your employees. That's really what it comes down to. It comes down to teaching. It comes down to mentoring. When you take the time to mentor your employees, you demonstrate a clear commitment to making them successful. So, if there was one most important thing, that's really what it comes down to, is mentoring,
Yeah.
coaching your employees. Number 5, celebrate small victories. I think that's really, really important. I think it's often overlooked in today's culture,
Mm-hmm.
but it's super important. Harvard Business Review did a study. They talked about the progress principle. And it's basically the concept that when you celebrate the small wins, it has a very transformational effect on an employee. It really affects their, I mean, first of all, it affects the way that they feel, right? And
Yeah.
secondly, it affects their long-term productivity. Because they feel better about themselves, they feel more engaged, they feel happier about the impact they're having on themselves and on the organization that they work for. So, that cannot be overlooked. And tied into that is recognizing and rewarding personal and professional growth. Again, something that's hugely overlooked, I think, in today's business world.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about recognition programs. Again, ZipRecruiter did a study not long ago where they talked to a bunch of different CEOs of organizations. I think it was 78% of them had a recognition or rewards program, but when they talked to the employees, only 58% of them knew anything about it. So there's a big disconnect there.
Yeah.
In what we're actually doing with these recognition programs. And at
So
the end of the day, the point of the recognition program is to motivate the employee uh, to maintain and improve their performance, and then secondarily to reinforce the types of behaviors that the company is looking for, that you're looking for as a leader.
yeah, and I think that's important. I remember, I don't know, it was probably 5, 6 weeks ago. I gave one of our cooks, I threw him $100 bill just because he'd been working his ass off. He does great work for us, but I just threw him $100 saying, hey, thanks, good work, really appreciated it. And I've done that. I do that quite a bit with certain employees. Certain people throw them 20, 30, 40, $50 here and there.
Sure.
But putting a program in place, I mean, that's even been something I've been wanting to do. I just, with as busy as I've been, I haven't been able to put exactly that into place. Sometimes we'll run like contests when we're pre-selling tickets for certain events. We always do a bonus to somebody whoever sells the most amount of tickets. But how would you, and I think this is a good starting point for somebody who wants to create a better culture, or, we're talking people management. I think the incentive program, reward program is something that any owner, bar owner, restaurant owner can start implementing into their business. So how would you start that? What would you suggest to a bar or restaurant owner to get started with a rewards program? What would they be looking at? How would they manage that? What should they offer? What should they give to really motivate and inspire them to do a better job for the owner?
Yeah, sure. Great question. And I'll answer that in two parts. Number one, sometimes it can be just as simple as saying thank you. It's
Hmm.
just acknowledging what someone has done, whether, just to reinforce that positive behavior that you're looking for.
Yeah.
I forget who it was, but someone said, don't always catch your employees doing things wrong. Catch them doing things right. And I think that's really powerful.
And
When you
I'm
catch them doing things right, it does the exact same. It has the same effect as giving them a $50 gift card, or whatever the case may be.
yeah, and
Same
I
logical effect.
yeah, I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to tell one quick little story because I was the type of person before a few years back until my manager said something to me where I was always pointing out the wrong things and I wasn't saying thank you enough. And he even just came to me and he says, Nick, you're always pointing fingers, this and that. He's like, it'd be nice to hear a thank you every once in a while. And it took a lot for him to say that to me, but when he said it to me, I sat back and I wasn't upset. I thought about it and I said, you know what? In my head, I'm like, I don't say thank you enough, and I am always picking out the wrong things. And now, ever since that time, it's made me think more and more. How can I thank more people? How can I recognize it more and show that I do appreciate them? And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a trap we all fall into in leadership positions, because we are focused and we're driven, and we're constantly driving or striving towards something. And sometimes we forget that some of our employees aren't quite as driven in us as us. And so we're nitpicking every little thing,
Yeah,
and trying to look for ways to improve. And we've got to remember that some people aren't as driven as us, and that's okay.
yeah,
We have to remember that we've got to acknowledge their successes, and just give them a thank you.
right.
The the second piece to that is when you're trying to put a rewards or recognition system in place, find out what motivates people,
Hmm.
right? Because what motivates Susie will not motivate Johnny, right? So find out some common themes, or you know, uh, maybe circle back and do different rewards programs for different people based on what motivates them. But don't think that there's just one comprehensive fix all for all of your problems. The other thing is that when it comes down to money or financial rewards, it doesn't always have to be money. It can be simple little things. Like I remember a time in my career where we used incentives, like being able to pick your own schedule for the week for
Ah,
team members. And you'd be surprised how effective that is. People really, really want that.
yeah. Some
And
people
that
want the
was
busier shifts, right?
exactly, or they want off on a weekend or
Yeah.
something. Those are the kind of things. It's about finding out what motivates your team members and acting on that.
And the best way
So
to
I
do
think
that is
that's
just
a good
ask
thing.
them, right?
What's that?
I said best way to find that out is just ask them,
Absolutely.
right?
Sit down, talk with your people.
Yeah.
When you get to know them, it goes back to that whole engagement thing. You sit down and spend time with your employees. You know what motivates them. And if you don't outright know what motivates them, to sit down and have a conversation with them. I guarantee you they'll appreciate it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And one thing, I mean, this kind of ties into this, but this is something I just did for the very first time about 3 weeks ago. And I mean, this has to do with people management and also just, just something that all owners could do. I sent out an email. I let everybody know at before a week before our monthly meeting that we have that I created a quick little Google form, short little survey. I wanted them to all fill out and just how they felt about each employee that we had. And I just wanted to find out, the good things, bad things. I told them nobody's going to know who filled this out, nobody's going to know what you said, but I would just like to know kind of. And I also had them talk about me, also my wife, and our managers, like how do you feel about them? And it was great just getting that feedback on how our employees view all the other employees, the managers, and the owners, because then you can kind of look at that and you know what employees you may need to work with. Because there was one key person where people were like, oh, she could talk to her tables more, be a little bit more interactive. But I think also getting that information from all your employees on everybody else and getting opinions could also help with just understanding your staff a little bit better, and kind of, and also you as an owner or manager, hey, what do people really think about you? And I think
Exactly.
that'll wake you up a little bit.
That's huge. That's huge. That's a lot of, I mean, I commend you for doing that. That's something that a lot of people don't have the courage to do. And it's really good to have, I mean, most people don't get to have that perspective of what other people think of them as a
Yeah,
leader. And I think that's some valuable insight right
yeah.
there for sure.
Because if people think I'm a bad owner or I'm not a good boss or I'm a bad lead, I want to know, and I'm not going to
For
get
sure.
upset. Be honest.
And, and and a big part of that, I think, is not just necessarily thinking that you're a bad person or a bad leader or whatever, but what could you do to improve? I think
Yeah,
those are the kind of questions that you need to ask. Is what can we as an organization do to improve? What can I as a leader do to improve to make things to make you happier, to make you more fulfilled, whatever the case may be, however you want to phrase it.
yeah. Every meeting that we have, I always ask, what can we do better to make your life easier, to make it more fun here? And I think that's a big takeaway that every bar owner, restaurant owner should be doing. I mean, I've got clients where they don't even have, meetings every 6 months, and I'm like, you guys got to have a meeting at least once a month, at least once every 2 months. Get everybody together and just talk. What are some different things that we could do to make things better, to make things work, more functionally? How can we create better systems or training systems? But yeah, no, it's really important to do that. Why don't we get more into the people management side? Because I think that is probably one of the hardest things from that I've seen working with clients, is working just with the different bar and restaurant owners, is how to become a better leader, how to become a better leader, especially teaching your managers to kind of take on the role for you so these guys can go take vacations and live life, but have someone there like them overseeing everybody and making sure everybody's happy and doing their job. Like, how do you
Sure.
clone yourself?
Exactly, and that's the trick, and that's not something that's easy to do. I'll tell you, you get some really harsh realities when you leave your company, your organization, your office, whatever it is. The real measure of a leader is what happens when they're not there,
Yeah,
right? So the question is, how do we clone ourselves? How do we teach someone else to do what we are trying to do or achieve the desired outcomes that we want? Because at the end of the day, we don't want to clone ourselves, right? If there
right.
were 100 Nicks running around in your organization, it would be a really crappy organization. If there were
Right.
100 Jesiahs running around, it would be crappy. The diversity and the difference between us is what makes us great. So
Hmm.
number one, it's important to understand that. And number two, again, it goes back to culture, and making sure that your employees are motivated, whether it's your team members, your hourly team members, or your managers. It's about motivating them in the proper way so they understand what the desired behaviors are, and especially for your management team, what the desired outcomes are. So I think constant communication is a huge part of that. I think making sure that they're actively involved in the culture that we talked about just a few minutes ago, I think those are hugely important to making them successful. And really, it comes down to communication.
Yeah,
If and this is another thing that I wanted to talk about. Know the performance problem areas. Know why there's an issue. What is the reason why you're having a performance issue, whether it's a manager or an hourly team member? there's really only two options. Either they didn't know or they didn't care,
Yeah.
right? And so it's important for you to understand the reasons before you jump into a counseling session with those employees. Understand what the reason is. If it's they didn't know, then that's one type of conversation, and that falls back on you as the leader for not communicating the desired outcomes or desired behaviors. If you're talking about the fact that they didn't care, it's a whole different conversation. And you might have an issue with your recruiting practices. I'm not sure why that person was there in the first place, but regardless, they're here. So you need to invest the time, effort, and energy into properly motivating that employee. Again, whether it's an hourly team member or a manager. Once you do that, once you've motivated them to care, then you've got to make sure that they know how to do whatever you're trying to get them to do. If they continue to not care, then maybe that's a situation where it's better for both parties if you just separate.
Yeah.
Your separate ways. But really, I think to answer your question, it really comes down to communication and making sure that they understand. Again, your employees or your managers understand what are we working towards, right? Understanding the vision of the organization or you as a leader. I
Right.
think that's crucial.
And before I kicked off the first 3 episodes of the podcast, I sent out a few emails to my email list just asking people, hey, what do you guys really want to hear about on the podcast, right? So I wanted to find out what the market wants to hear. How can I deliver value? One of the things that kind of ties into what we're talking about now and kind of what you said earlier is, how do you create a way to get people to want to come work for you rather than you chasing people? One of the big things that a lot of people were asking was, they're having troubles finding good staff. They're having
Yep.
trouble, so what are you seeing now? Like what can bar and restaurant owners do, or what strategies can they put into place to find the best people to attract them, to want to come work for them? Like how do you go find these people? Like
Sure.
I've done a lot of stuff with Facebook ads because you can target people based by age and everything. But I mean, what's your strategy based on, finding good help? Because that seems like a big problem right now in our industry.
Good question. Yeah, for sure. And it really depends on the market that you're in as well. That
Yeah,
has a huge impact on it.
that's true.
But going back to what I was saying before, it really is all about culture. And remember, we're playing a long game here. We're not playing a short game, right?
Right.
So put kind of put it out of your head. You're not going to get, if you're struggling for staff, it's not going to happen for you the next month. It's probably not going to happen for you in the next 6 months. We're playing a long game. So what you want to do is build a culture where people know in your community that you are the best place to work, right? Because you take care of your team members, you recognize them, you reward them, you engage with them, you make it an enjoyable place to work. And that is really how, there's no other really good way to do it. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work, a lot of patience, a lot of effort, and you're going to have turnover throughout the course of this. But at the end of the day, after a year, 2 years, you're going to be in a much, much better position because everyone around you, people talk in the restaurant industry, right?
Yeah.
When servers go out for their after shift drink or whatever, they talk. They talk to us, the server across the street, right?
Right.
And if your employee is the one that's out there saying, "Hey, that sucks. You had a crappy night at work. I had a great night at work. It wasn't the best, but it was fantastic because I knew my leadership team was looking out for me. I knew that things would be taken care of, and so I was able to do the best work that I was capable of because I knew I was going to be taken care of."
Yeah.
That gets talked about. And
Yeah.
it takes time, but eventually you'll get to a position where everyone knows you are the best place to work.
Right. No, I like that. I like that. And before we wrap up, I mean, is there anything else that we left out that you think is, really, really important for bar owners, restaurant owners to know, to start thinking about when it comes to, people management and just making sure you got a kick-ass staff and leadership team that, cares and wants to do all they can for you and for your customers?
Yes, 3 important takeaways here. People management is literally all about caring, coaching, and consistency. When you do all 3 of those things effectively, you're going to be in a much, much better position. And we could talk about it for hours and hours about
Right.
what caring, coaching, and consistency means. But those are the 3 fundamentals. One thing that we didn't talk about was teaching the why before the how. Again, Simon Sinek talks a lot about knowing your why. I think that's super important. It's overlooked a lot in the restaurant industry. You tell Susie to go do this, you don't talk to her about the why. It's a big disconnect there.
So, and
So,
what is the why? I get what you're saying, but just in case someone's listening and they're like, "What do you mean? What the hell's the why?
yeah,
What's the why?"
good. Thanks for bringing that up. So it depends on the situation, right? What I'm talking about is different from your internal why. What I'm talking about is if you want Susie to focus more on guest satisfaction, you want her to change her behavior, do this instead of this, talk to her about why that's important.
Yes.
Why are we doing that? Why are we sitting here having this conversation about how you can be more effective on guest satisfaction? How can you take care of your guests better? Right? Talk to her about the why. Once that's the way our brains work. Once we understand the why behind it, it's much easier to retain the information that's trying to be communicated to us.
Right. And it'll probably
Another
stand out more
aspect,
and make sense. You want them to understand exactly why, because they don't
sure,
understand what might be an important in the business, but getting them
exactly,
to
and they're
know.
not just robots.
Right.
They're not robots. They have brains themselves, and they need to
Right.
think. So, yeah. And another aspect to that is, we talk about practice. Anytime you're talking about developing people, practice, 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 right? I don't care if you're a teacher. I don't care if you're a basketball coach. It all comes down to practice. And the thing that I've learned is that it's not just about practice. It's about spaced learning, spaced repetition, right? So let's say you're a piano teacher and you want to teach a student, you want to get it all done as fast as possible. You got 5 hours with them. Would you rather spend all 5 hours in one afternoon, or would you rather space out those hours over the course of 5 weeks? I think intuitively we all know we want to space it out. The reason why is because that's how our brains learn. We're able to retain information much more effectively over the course of an extended period of time. We're also able to use the time in between those sessions to practice. So
Right.
you end up someone who is much more in the position that you want them to be in at the end of those 5 weeks. So spaced learning, spaced repetition, it takes time. So many people are looking for quick fixes in this world. None of this kind of stuff, especially when it comes to people.
Yeah.
There's no quick fixes.
Right.
Time.
Awesome. Well, Josiah, if anybody wants to reach out to you, how do you got a website? Do you got somewhere that people can go to get more information about you? And if they want to, maybe get some help, coaching, consulting on the people management side of things and in building a better company culture?
Absolutely. So you can visit my website at graybarsolutions.com. It's GREY, graybarsolutions.com, or check out my Facebook page at Graybar Solutions.
Awesome. I
Okay.
I appreciate it. We'll put those in the show note links and everything for anybody who's watching this or listening to this on the podcast. Josiah, great episode. Thanks, a lot of value. And we will see you guys on the next episode.